Hey y'all, Michelle Raza here with the Finding Yourself Book Club. Today we're going to discuss Lindsay Gibson's Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. We've been covering stories from chapter 6 onwards when I started summarizing her work instead of reading it. Also, I was very excited to have received a letter from her, which I read to you all a few videos back. Please do like, subscribe if you can. And check out our website. We're at www.findingyourselfsatx.com. There you can take our free life balance questionnaire and submit it to us for your first free consult. You can also just submit a contact form and we can have a free form discussion. No need to use the questionnaire if you're not comfortable. So here we're going to go over the stories from chapter 10, How to Identify Emotionally Mature People, aka Building Your Tribe. Okay, so we have Tyrones Story, and Tyrones Story is under being respectful and reciprocal and respecting boundaries. Tyrone's girlfriend, Sylvie, frequently took charge in ways that made him uncomfortable, and lately it had been getting worse. For instance, when Tyrone wanted to slow down the relationship, Sylvie analyzed this as a sign of what she called his fear of commitment. She told him that he wasn't allowing himself to see her as she was now and was instead viewing her through the lens of her past behavior. As Tyrone became increasingly unhappy in the relationship, Sylvie urged him to act happier. She kept telling him to smile more because she missed that in him. But Tyrone was missing something too. A partner considerate enough to accept his feelings and consider the possibility that her behavior might be part of the problem. This is Dan's story, and it's under They Give Back. Dan originally came to therapy after the breakup of his marriage to a self-absorbed woman who exploited his generous nature and didn't give much back. In therapy, he realized that he'd sacrificed too much, violating the principles of fairness just as his wife had in taking too much. As Dan began to practice better self-care by not being overly generous, he noticed that he was becoming more interested in women who had a greater capacity for reciprocity. Still, this new way of relating felt unusual to him at first. For example, after paying for an expensive dinner with his new girlfriend, Dan was amazed when she said she wanted to treat him to an upcoming concert. "You gave me a great evening," she told him, "and I want to do something fun for you." Dan was amazed by her reciprocity and generosity, and he was also able to correctly identify it as a sign of her emotional maturity. Just looking for the stories here. Okay, Crystal's story is under They Apologize and Make Amends. Crystal found email evidence that her husband, Marcos, was having an affair. Marcos begged for forgiveness, but the fallout from her discovery almost ended their marriage. After a temporary separation, Crystal decided that she was willing to work on the relationship, but one of her conditions was that they keep talking about what had happened. She needed to understand, and she needed more details. Marcos couldn't fathom this and told her, "I said I'm sorry. What more do you want? Why do you keep bringing it up? What do you want me to do?" The answer was simple. Crystal wanted Marcos to self-reflect, explain why he'd had the affair, and know how betrayed she felt. She also needed Marcos to hear her out instead of shutting her down. People who have been betrayed are often consumed with getting all the facts. It may be morbid curiosity, but getting their questions answered can help them process their pain. It wasn't enough to just apologize. Marcos needed to be available to answer Crystal's questions as she struggled to understand what happened. And this goes back to the Gottman stuff about recovering from infidelity, which is one of the other video series that I've been working on. And basically, the long story short on that one is that you need to talk about what happened. You don't want to divulge details of what happened in the bedroom, but you need to understand, you and your partner need to understand your needs that were not being met within the relationship and why the partner strayed. And it could be, it's not to make an excuse for the affair, but it's just there's something lacking, and trying to understand what that is. In that series, actually, I just posted 1 or 2 video sessions ago, or I don't know, maybe 5 at this point. There was a self-sufficient wife taking care of 5 kids and a husband who worked, and he had an affair with a very emotionally needy woman. And it wasn't necessarily that, like, he loved his wife and he loved everything about her, but she was so self-sufficient that he needed to be needed, and that's why he went for a needier woman. And of course she had needs, but she was just not burdening him with the needs. But anyway, that's a totally separate topic, and I'm getting off topic here. Okay, so here's Ellen's story within they're responsive and their empathy makes you feel safe. And again, we're talking about how to identify emotionally mature people. Ellen's boyfriend was largely incapable of empathy. If she tried to tell him about her day, he listened just long enough to use her story as a springboard to start talking about what happened to him. Eventually, Ellen worked up the nerve to ask him if he could listen and show more empathy, but he thought she was saying he was a bad person. He shot back that she wasn't perfect either. He couldn't respond to her emotional need because he could only hear her request as a criticism against which he had to defend himself. Jill's story. Jill's story is under they reflect on their actions and try to change. Jill tried for years to get her husband to look at how he ignored her, but each attempt to solicit his empathy resulted in a counterattack in which he maintained that Jill was impossible to please. Over time, his refusal to engage in self-reflection shut down Jill's efforts at intimate communication with him. It wasn't surprising that Jill ultimately left her husband for another man, someone who did care about what she thought and how she felt. Her new partner reconsidered his behavior when she brought it up, and then made an effort to do things differently. And I think that was the last story. There is a Bill of Rights, which I'm sure that I've read before, but I want to find and read again. So let me pause here. Okay, so I'm sure I covered this in the last video or the final video on chapter 10 that I posted before, but I'm going to do it one more time just in case. And it's it's page 193 of Lindsay's book. I hope you bought your own copy. The exercise is exploring new ways of being in relationships. Let's create a profile of emotional maturity that you can work toward. The following lists present a picture of how an emotionally mature person might interact and behave in relationships. Read through the following lists of new behaviors, beliefs, and values, and choose a few to practice. Just pick 1 or 2 at a time, and be gentle with yourself as you work on them. Some might be harder than others. The first section here is being willing to ask for help. I'll ask for help whenever I need to. I'll remind myself that if I need something, most people will be glad to help if they can. I'll use clear, intimate communication to ask for what I want, explaining my feelings and the reasons for my request. I'll trust that most people will listen if I ask them to. The next section is being myself, whether people accept me or not. When I state my thoughts clearly and politely without malice, I won't try to control how people take it. I won't give more energy than I really have. Instead of trying to please, I'll give other people a true indication of how I feel. I won't volunteer for something if I think I'll resent it later. If someone says something I find offensive, I'll offer an alternative viewpoint. I won't try to change the other person's mind. I just won't let the statement go unremarked upon. Sustaining and appreciating emotional connections. I'll make a point of keeping in touch with special people I care about and returning their calls or electronic messages. I'll think of myself as a strong person who deserves to give and receive help from my community of friends. Even when people aren't saying the right thing, I'll tune in to whether they're trying to help me. If their effort makes me feel emotionally nurtured, I'll express my gratitude. When I'm irritated with someone, I'll think about what I want to say that could improve our relationship. I'll wait until I cool off and then ask if the other person is willing to listen to my feelings. Having reasonable expectations for myself. I'll keep in mind that being perfect isn't always necessary. I'll get stuff done rather than obsess over getting things done perfectly. When I get tired, I'll rest or do something different. My level of physical energy will tell me when I've been doing too much. I won't wait for an accident or illness to make me stop. When I make a mistake, I'll chalk it up to being human. Even if I think I've anticipated everything, there will be outcomes I don't expect. I'll remember that everyone is responsible for their own feelings and for expressing their needs clearly. Beyond common courtesy, it isn't up to me to guess what others want. Communicating clearly and actively seeking the outcomes I want. This is the last section. I won't expect people to know what I need unless I tell them. Caring about me doesn't mean they automatically know what I'm feeling. If people close to me upset me, I'll use my pain to identify my underlying need. Then I'll use clear, intimate communication to provide guidance on how they could give it to me. When my feelings are hurt, I'll try to understand my reaction first. Did something trigger feelings from my past? Or did the person really treat me insensitively? If someone was insensitive, I'll ask him or her to hear me out. I'll be thoughtful to other people, and if they aren't thoughtful in return, I'll ask them to be more considerate, and then let it go. I'll ask for something as many times as it takes to get a clear answer. When I get tired of interacting, I'll politely speak up, asking if we can continue our contact at another time. I'll explain kindly that I'm just out of gas at the moment. Do you get a sense of how much more energy and lightness you'd feel if most of these statements were true for you? You'd be active and self-expressive in your relationships, treating yourself kindly and expecting to be heard by others. You'd be freeing yourself from emotional loneliness. Even if you didn't learn these values and ways of interacting as a child, you can develop them now. Having emotionally immature parents may have undermined your self-acceptance, self-expressiveness, and hopes for genuine intimacy, but there's nothing to hold you back now as an adult. Summary. This chapter outlined common attributes of emotionally mature people so that you can recognize such people more easily. Now, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, what is that? Please go back and watch the video where I summarize this final chapter. It also briefly summarized new ways of relating that can help you create more satisfying and supportive relationships with others. Now that you know what emotional maturity really looks like, you won't be tempted to settle for the next person who shows you some attention or offers you the bare minimum in a relationship. You'll be able to look for what you want and be comfortable observing others until you find it. As you reflect on your emotional strengths and capacity for connection, you'll find that the keys to happier relationships have been within you all along.